Hi everyone, welcome to the 102 Hours YouTube channel. Tonight, we're going to talk about the story Alphabet Killings, the killer who played by letters. A damp breeze rustles newspapers pinned to lampposts, their headlines caught in the yellowing glow of early evening. You probably won't survive this, so before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Post your location and local time in the comments. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. The case is the Alphabet Killings, the killer who played by letters, concerning 3 young girls in Rochester, New York, recounted here in a second-person narrative. Are you ready? Let's begin. You trudge through early 70s Rochester under a slate sky, each footstep echoing on rain-slick sidewalks. Steam curls from basement vents as you pass brick tenements and shuttered storefronts. In the distance, the skyline looms like a silent jury. The Genesee River's dark current whispers past old industrial docks. A faint clang of iron resonates from an abandoned railroad bridge. Street lamp halos wobble as you walk beneath them, each stain of light promising that danger could lurk just beyond its glow. By 1972, federal law made kidnapping a national crime after the infamous Lindbergh case further illuminated the horrors of abduction. That same year, the FBI's Behavioral Science Unit was formally organized, though profiling remained a fledgling art. Officers in Rochester pored over case files, hoping to apply these new techniques to something they still could not quite define. A pattern based on letters. Local rumors suggest the killer left Scrabble tiles spelling victims' initials near body sites, a detail so bizarre that some detectives dismissed it as street folklore. But rumor or not, a few tiles did turn up, and gossip blossomed like ivy in shadowed alleys. You imagine finding those tiny cubes among gravel, bits of wood scratched with a child's fate. Investigators still question whether the killer deliberately used the victim's initials as a sick signature, or whether coincidence carved a false trail. Thick fog drifts down Exchange Boulevard as you pass the empty lot where Carmen Colón vanished. You crane your neck, half expecting to glimpse her small jacket snagged on a chain-link fence, the red stitches of her name tag still visible. In your mind's eye, you press on into the neighborhood of the arts, cobblestone streets slick with early frost. A broken payphone hangs before a mural, its cord lost like a severed promise. A lone street performer drums a distant melody, but his tune warps into something unsettled, the lullaby turned dirge. You stop, boots clattering against a rock-strewn gutter, considering that a child might have walked here, singing to steady her trembling heart. A battered flyer flaps against a telephone pole. Missing, Wanda Walkowicz. Age 11. The typeface is smudged by rain, but her eyes in the photograph stare straight at you, pleading. You can't tell if they are windows to innocence or portals to something far more sinister. Muttered warnings drift from a passing car. Lock your doors, keep them inside. You feel neighbors jerk their curtains closed, as though drawing down the shutters might keep the horrors at bay. The hum of a police radio crackles somewhere. In the distance, a synthetic voice reciting coordinates and times. You catch Baltimore Street at 11:15 p.m. before it hisses away. Sirens chew at the horizon, cresting and receding like tidal threats. There's talk that officers mounted stakeouts in parked squad cars, cameras at the ready. They scanned the riverbanks with flashlights that pierced the night, but revealed nothing but drifting mist. The air grows colder as you enter Maplewood Park, the gravel path crunching beneath your feet. Frosted breath fogs before you, each exhale. A fragile ghost. You imagine the ground here soft earth by a willow tree where Michelle Maenza would later be found. Her white sweater stark against the dark mud. The willow's branches droop like accusing fingers, leaves whispering secrets you can almost decipher. An old legend offers a fleeting comfort. Supposedly, a kindly night watchman once glimpsed a slender figure cradling a doll by the canal. He followed only to find footprints dissolving in the soft ground. Impossible footprints, perfectly sized for a child, yet too perfect. Whether that tale holds water, no one can say, but it drifts through local memory like flotsam, haunting back alleys and diner booths. You lift your hand to your ear, as if listening for a whisper, a clue, anything. The wind picks up, rattling a nearby sign advertising fall hayrides. It's cheerful fare now, sounding ironic. Leaves tumble across the gravel like stray letters in an unwritten message. Every shadow feels alive, every sound a portent. This is Rochester's shadow, and no one here, least of all you, will ever look at a lamppost the same way again. You step into the chill of dusk on November 16th, 1971, trailing the last gold leaves as they drift across the cracked sidewalk. Carmen Colón, just 10 years old, had been playing along Seneca Park's winding paths, ovals of grass and bench shadows, waiting for her older brother to finish practice. A few minutes later, she was gone. One moment you see her bright pink jacket bunched behind a tree. The next, it lies empty. The grass whispering secrets you can almost hear. Audio of police dispatch bleeds through old AM radios. In the 1970s, fewer than 30% of households even tuned into scanners. The FBI's National Crime Information Center database, launched in 1967 to link fingerprints and mugshots, nationwide, had barely begun to transform how agencies shared data, and nobody thought to run a missing child alert there that night. Searchlights slice through the canopy as volunteers fan out along the canal towpath. You kneel beside a trail of footprints, tiny, precise, as if drawn by a ruler. The prints lead you toward murky water where reeds crowd the bank. Investigators still question whether those marks were made by the killer copying a child's gait or by some other trick of the ground. Your breath hangs as you hear a wail of sirens and the murmur of microphones taped to helmets. Officers in white gloves sift through fallen leaves. Each rustle feels like a gasp against your eardrum. A quirky rumor flares. Some locals whisper that Scrabble tiles spelling CC floated in the reeds, but no tiles ever surfaced, and most detectives dismissed it as an ex-cop's prank to taunt the department. You follow Detective Sergeant Tom Roach, whose steady hand has closed more than a dozen homicide cases, as he kneels near the water's edge. His calloused fingers trace a semicircle in the mud, measuring something only he can see. He exhales slowly, an almost imperceptible sigh that reaches right through your chest. You pause, letting the wet chill seep into your bones. First light finds you scanning the murky water. Carmen's left glove drifts apriva, snagged on a half-submerged branch. You pluck it free. Its fleece lining is stiff with dew. You roll it in your palm, feeling the fabric's softness against the hard logic of what happened. For a moment, the world holds its breath, and in that silence, the park seems to mourn with you. By the early 1970s, the national homicide rate peaked at just under 10 per 100,000 residents, a grim backdrop that made Rochester's residents believe violence belonged to bigger cities. Local detectives more accustomed to bar brawls and petty thefts, were unprepared for a predator lurking in their own green spaces. So they summoned FBI agents in dark suits, hoping the behavioral experts could find a method to madness. Hours later, in a marshy grove downriver, Carmen is found. Her body lies half hidden among reeds, the ground soft and encroaching. She wears her initial ceased on her sweater in bright red thread, an innocent marker now morbidly resonant. You cover your mouth as the scene unfolds. Chalk, lines drawn by unsteady hands, tarps stretched taut, an almost surgical precision that sends a shiver crawling up your spine. The coroner speaks in measured tones, a steady cadence that sounds too calm. Suffocation is listed as the cause, but he offers no graphic details. True crime without gore, letting your mind fill in the spaces. You strain to catch every syllable, feeling each clinical word land like a stone in your chest. A hush falls over the city. That afternoon, the Democrat and Chronicle devotes its entire front page to Carmen's story, the photograph of her bright face gazing out like a plea. It's a rare move newspapers only grant that space when a community's heart breaks in public. You feel the weight of every printed line, each one a reminder that life can be reduced to headlines and initials in an instant. Volunteers gather at the community center, spreading out maps and photographs across folding tables. Parents clutch, steaming coffee, breath misting in the cold air. They pin missing posters of Carmen beside fields of chrysanthemums and daisies, hoping someone remembers seeing her skipping stones moments before she vanished. Some claim they saw a dark sedan idling near the canal. Others insist a tall red-haired man prowled the fringe of the park. Investigators still question whether these tips are credible or merely collective panic projecting guilt. You slip away to the canal's edge once more. The water's surface shimmers with city lights, but all you see is a mosaic of questions. Twilight turns to night, and you imagine the scene replaying. Carmen's small figure darting between trunks, her laughter echoing, then silence. Afterward, patrol cars circled the park for weeks. Street lamps glare like watchful eyes, and broken glass is cleaned from benches so nobody trips on evidence. By December, parents forbid their children from playing alone. The word kidnap slithers into everyday conversation, a menace hiding behind casual chit-chat. Night falls again, and you find yourself beneath a lone lamppost. Leaves skitter across the pavement like letters in an unsent note. You press your hand to the cold metal pole, as though feeling for Carmen's warmth. The canal gurgles beside you, each ripple a whisper in the dark. You know this is only the beginning, a single disappearance that would etch its pattern into the city's soul. You step into the bullpen of the Monroe County Sheriff's Department, fluorescent lights humming overhead as detectives huddle around a corkboard covered in photographs and maps. The term serial killer won't even be coined until 1975 by FBI agents studying similar cases in California. So here in 1972, they're still fumbling for language to describe someone who murders multiple victims in separate incidents. Still, you sense the shift. This is no ordinary missing child case. Detectives shuffle photos of Carmen Colón, Wanda Walkowicz, and Michelle Maenza in a tight cluster. Underneath each snapshot, a town name is Churchville, Webster, Macedonic, sharing the same first letter as the girl pictured. You watch them draw a thin red line from Churchville to Webster to Macedon on a large county map. It arcs like a cruel alphabet, each point spelling out the killer's signature without a single note from him. By the early 1970s, Most departments depended on paper records and phone trees to distribute information about violent crimes, and Monroe County is no exception. Fingerprint logs are handwritten indexes. Mugshot files occupy metal filing cabinets that groan when they open. Yet somehow this pattern slipped through the cracks until someone noticed that the dump sites all began with the same letter as the victim's initials. It's a bone-chilling realization. Investigators still question whether the alphabetical pattern was the work of the killer or the product of selective memory and media hype. A few old-timer officers whisper that a local beat cop found stray Scrabble tiles near the canal bank after Carmen's disappearance. But the official file contains no record of them. Even stranger is an obscure rumor about red balloons tied to fence posts outside Macedon, as if marking the site for a twisted scavenger hunt. Yet nobody ever produced a single balloon or ribbon for evidence. You pause beside a coffee-stained typist's table, letting the clatter of typewriters and low murmurs settle into a steady rhythm. It feels like the whole room is holding its breath, waiting for the next clue to drop. When word of the pattern reaches Rochester's major newspapers, the phrase "initial killings" appears on front pages, fanning both fear and fascination. Journalists quote criminologists, noting that behavioral profiling is still a fledgling art. Just 2 years after the FBI's Behavioral Science Unit opened in Quantico, and few experts can offer more than cautious speculation. That nascent unit, staffed by a handful of former homicide detectives, is already experimenting with personality profiles. But profiling a child murderer by pattern alone is uncharted territory. In the hallway, you overhear a heated debate. "This can't be coincidence," one detective insists, pointing at the map. 3 cases, 3 initials, 3 towns. There has to be a message. Another shakes his head. Or maybe we're seeing what we want to see. There were dozens of small towns around here, and you could fit names to any pattern if you try hard enough. The tension coils tighter as they decide to widen the search radius, cross-referencing other missing child reports from neighboring counties. Every blank line on a missing person form now feels ominous good. The next victim be waiting to fill in the initials, and yet leads dry up almost as soon as they appear. No matching initials for a 4th case. No confirmed sightings of a suspicious vehicle. Late that afternoon, you slip out into the golden haze of autumn light sliding across Court Street. Cars honk impatiently, unaware of the dread pressing in just beyond city limits. You tuck your hands into your coat pockets, fingers grazing a crumpled case file in your breast pocket. In the distance, church bells toll for evening service, their sonorous tone undercut by the knowledge that innocence in this county has been irreversibly broken. Now, the pattern is no longer a theory, it's a taunt. Every initial, every town sign, every stray rumor adds another letter to a message only the killer can fully read. And you know the next chapter is already waiting to be written in blood. You step onto the Walkowicz family's tidy front lawn just as dusk slips into night. The air tasting of pine and lingering cinnamon from a neighbor's bakery. You pause beneath the yellow porch light, its glow flickering like a question mark. What could make a mother's cozy home into the epicenter of every parent's worst nightmare? Inside, laughter once mixed with the clink of teacups. Now there's only hushed sobs and the metallic rasp of a grieving father's breath. By the early 1970s, law enforcement across America handled child abductions almost entirely within local jurisdictions. There was no national Amber Alert until 1996, so when 11-year-old Wanda Walkowicz vanished on December 7, 1972, Her case stayed in Rochester County files until it was too late. You trace icy patterns across the porch railing, imagining how little Wanda's gloved fingertips might once have danced over the wood, looking for the painted initials WW carved years before by a bored neighbor kid. Inside the modest living room, you find Mrs. Walkowicz kneeling beside a battered armchair, her rosary beads slipping between trembling fingers. The scent of lavender sachets on a nearby table seems out of place, a reminder of childhood goodnight rituals disrupted forever. You crouch quietly, offering the softest nod as she describes Wanda's last afternoon, building snow angels in the yard, then turning to wave at her mother with a grin like sunshine. You hear the creak of the floorboards under your weight and realize your boots ring sharp against the silence too loud, as if you're announcing your intrusion into grief. A battered bulletin board stands against one wall, layered with photographs. Wanda's school portrait, smiling in her uniform. Snapshots from a Girl Scouts camp. A family reunion on Lake Ontario. You study each picture until her eyes feel familiar, then follow the curled edges of a flyer pinned below, reading the chilling words: missing Wanda Walkowicz, age 11, contact Rochester PD. The ink is faded where rain seeped through the porch window, turning her plea into a ghostly blur. Later that night, you join the search party as it fans out along the frost-crisp canal towpath. Flashlights sliced ribbons through the gloom, and you slip between two towering oaks, each breath crystallizing into clouds. The crunch of leaves reminds you of broken promises. Every snapped twig could be a clue, each rustle a whisper from Wanda herself. Somewhere ahead, a volunteer coughs. Further off, a dog barks, its sound bouncing off the canal's still surface. Rumor has it that, at the exact hour of Wanda's disappearance, a single red balloon drifted past the towpath, bobbing against the currents of Wanda macabre breadcrumb in a story that makes no sense. No one ever found a balloon, and yet that image sticks in your mind, a bright orb against charcoal sky, spelling out WW in some warped imitation of the killer's pattern. It's the kind of tale that wouldn't hold up in court, but you tuck it away alongside every other strange fragment. When the search ends at dawn, you're among the first to glimpse the tarp in a shallow marsh near Webster Road. You push aside the wet canvas and see Wanda's small frame curled as if asleep, her coat buttoned neatly, hands clasped over a well-worn diary now missing its cover. Investigators still question whether that diary was taken by the killer as a trophy or removed by someone trying to protect her privacy. You inhale and taste the cold earth, a metallic temps that clings to your tongue. Back at the station, detectives convene under buzzing fluorescents, coffee cooling in styrofoam cups. You hover by Sergeant Walsh, whose square jaw is set in determination. He flips through Wanda's school records, noting her favorite subject penmanship, the fact that her teacher praised how neatly she formed the letter W. It's a grim irony you can't ignore, an innocent talent turned into sinister signature. Across the room, an evidence board glitters with pins and string. Motley newspaper clippings frame interviews with neighbors who claim to have seen a dark sedan idling near the park at exactly 3:42 p.m. The precision of that time haunts you too neat to be coincidence, too precise for a frantic kidnapper. Still learning the ropes, you lean in and read a detective's penciled note, "Suspect may be toying with us," followed by a scrawl, "Check out-of-town Leeds Macedon." Later, back at Mrs. Walkowicz's kitchen table, you sip lukewarm tea and let the silence swell. Outside, a lone car horn blares, and you close your eyes, picturing Wanda's last smile. You remember that in 1973, the FBI's behavioral profiling unit defined signature as the distinct personal touch a killer leaves behind. Yet here, WW feels less like a clue and more like an echo of a child's innocence twisted into a threat. A pause settles in the room, offering a moment of fragile calm before the next wave of dread. You stretch your shoulders, tasting the tannin of old oak floors beneath the linoleum. In the fridge, a half-eaten cake sits under plastic wrap, frosting still dotted with rainbow sprinkles. You press your palm against its cooling surface, reminding yourself that somewhere beyond tragedy, ordinary life persists. Wanda's disappearance fractures the town's sense of safety. The day after her body is found, schools cancel afternoon recess. Church bells toll in somber warning. The local children whisper that the killer can't be stopped, that his initials are written on every street sign, every letterbox. You hear their fear carried on winter winds, drifting through cracked window panes into homes that once felt secure. As night closes in again, you make your way to the neighborhood park where Wanda was last seen. A lone bench sits under a bare oak, its branches clawing at the moonlit sky. You lean against the cold metal, wrapping your coat tighter, and imagine Wanda's laughter echoing between these trees. In that echo, you hear the weight of unanswered questions. Why her? How could a pattern so cruel be so meticulously kept? In the hush of pre-dawn, you realize the town has changed forever. Where there was once innocence, now there's a ledger of loss, each WA tally mark against hope. And you know the next discovery will only deepen the darkness. You lean back in your creaky kitchen chair as dawn light slants through sun-faded curtains. Across the table, the morning paper waits, crisp as a threat. The Democrat and Chronicle splashes the alphabet killer strikes again in bold serif type. The letters scrambling in your vision like tiles from a haunted Scrabble game. Every headline hammers at your senses. Child, victim, no. Two found. Parents in panic. Who is the letter demon? And you feel a lump knot in your throat. By 1972, newspaper circulation in America peaked at over 55 million daily readers, and crime stories were among the most read beats in every city, big and small. In Minneapolis, Life magazine ran an expose on the national crime wave, while local dailies like yours competed by naming the suspect alphabet before any detective coined that moniker. You trace your finger down the column where a grainy black and white photo shows reporters jostling outside Rochester PD, notebooks raised like weapons. Typewriters clatter in newsrooms, teletypes roar out bulletins, and radio DJs seize on the alphabet killer brand, just two shock letters that would lodge in every ear across the county. Investigators still question whether the nickname helped narrow focus or distracted from solid leads. But no one denies it ignited a panic that radiated from suburban lawns to factory floors. By late December, grocery stores reported a surge in locks and window bars, and door-to-door alarm salesmen thrived on fear. That afternoon, you slip into a town hall meeting at the Monroe County Community Center. Rows of folding chairs creak as parents cluster under buzzing fluorescents, clutching hot coffee and trembling bulletins. The sheriff promises increased patrols along school routes, while reporters scribble in notebooks, eager for tomorrow's splash. A local grandmother mutters she saw tarot cards marked with 3 crosses at the old mill. Some superstition you tuck away alongside every odd detail. You flip pages to find a sidebar titled Signs of Safety, offering advice. Don't let children play alone after dark. Check for strange symbols on lampposts. Report any red balloons. That last tip reads like a joke, but you shiver anyway. A grainy Polaroid in the corner shows a Menia Street lamp marked with red chalk, initial WWL, though the caption admits the photo may be staged. Your phone rings. You're on local radio that morning, invited to share safety tips. You cradle the handset and listen as the host asks, "Do you think this alphabet is some deranged genius or just a copycat grabbing headlines?" You reply in measured tones, reminding listeners that panic doesn't solve crimes, but vigilance helps. Still, you catch the tremor in your voice. Outside, you feel the air charged as neighbors peer out windows at passing cars. Every rumble of an engine, every stray cat's meow feels like a portent. In the grocery parking lot, someone scrawls "Alphabet Killer Scene Here" on a bulletin board, and you scan the lot as though expecting to see his shadow among the wagons. By 1973, true crime had become a hit genre on network television, with shows reconstructing notorious cases in flickering black and white. But Rochester's ordeal seemed too local, too raw, to make it to national airwaves. Still, small markets syndicated the story. A hushed narrator intoned "Alphabet Killer" between grainy photos and ominous music, and you felt a prickle as though the radio waves themselves breathed dread inside the city newsroom. You step through swinging doors into a hive of activity. Reporters shout over ringing telephones. Linotype machines roar to life, and red ink smudges on copy as hungry. Editors race deadlines. In one corner, a young reporter breathlessly outlines his article on the initials pattern, his eyes bright with equal parts fear and fascination. You hover near an editor's desk, absorbing every correction scrawled in the margin, each adjustment, sharpening the killer's brand in bolder type. Later, you pause under a neon News 8 sign outside the station, its glow flickering like a heartbeat. Photographers flashes silhouette you against broadcast fans, and you realize that every click of a camera cements your own role in this unfolding drama as witness, chronicler, and potential suspect. Later, at 4th Ward Elementary, you volunteer to help hang safety posters. The artworked childish outlines of stick figures holding hands feels painfully innocent against the headlines you've memorized. A class clown nervously jokes, maybe the killer's just allergic to letters. You force a laugh, then catch the teacher's eye and see a flicker of reproach. Humor in the face of fear is a shield, but only until the next scream that night. The airwaves crackle with a news flash. A third letter, labeled victim, may have been targeted in a nearby county, but spared at the last moment. The reporter's voice crescendos. If you find suspicious initials painted near your home, report them immediately. You lie awake by an open window, the gravel on the street rattling like Scrabble tiles being shaken in a jar. When evening arrives, you tune in to Channel 8's special report on the Alphabet Killer. The screen dissolves from studio lights to black as a solemn anchor intones. Tonight, a town reeling from heartache. Grainy reenactments show shadowy actors tracing initials in mud, each stroke accompanied by orchestral chords that grip your chest. You lean forward, breath caught between fear and fascination. In quiet moments, you recall that radio DJs once read the names of the girls on air, asking listeners to light candles and spell out their initials for justice. You imagine those flickering flames gathering like illuminated letters, forming a silent vigil against an invisible killer. Later still, as you walk home under a crimson sunset, you pass mailboxes plastered with flyers reading CCWW, and MM in red ink. Each one feels like a knock on your door, a pulse of dread reminding you that no address is safe. And you wonder just how many more letters the killer plans to write before this deadly alphabet is complete. As midnight ticks closer, you press your palm to a street lamp, tracing its cold metal like a letter waiting to be written. You realize that the media's coil around this case has made every citizen a spectator and a suspect at once. The alphabet can kill, you think, and you tremble at the thought that the next word may be your own. You slip into a cold conference room at Rochester PD, where local detectives sit shoulder to shoulder with two tall men in dark suits. One taps a thin folder stamped Quantico, and you lean forward on a folding chair, feeling the vinyl creak beneath you. By 1972, J. Edgar Hoover had authorized the FBI's Behavioral Science Unit to study violent offenders. But the art of profiling was no more than half-formed theory, one you're about to witness in its infancy. Detective Malone clears his throat and spreads crime scene photos on the table. Grainy shots of muddy riverbanks and Scrabble tiles. Across from you, Agent Farrow sketches a simple diagram connecting victims' initials to dump site letters in looping ink. You watch him trace the line, teaching you that a killer's signature isn't just method but personal ritual, a concept the BSU would only formally define years later. Rumor has it that the killer might be someone with routine access. Two children's initials, teachers, librarians, even postal workers on their nightly rounds. A fringe theory suggests the murderer is a local letter carrier who delivered mail by torchlight, memorizing every initial on every doorstep. You picture a man in uniform, red lantern swinging, slipping Scrabble tiles into riverside reeds. Investigators still question whether those rumors of a postal uniform suspect were ever more than bar chatter. Farrow clears his throat and describes organized versus disorganized killers, the former planning meticulously, leaving few traces, the latter striking impulsively in chaotic bursts. You shift in your seat, realizing how this case fits the neat mold of organization: a predator who studies maps, times his movements, and topos his crimes. That same year, the BSU drew lessons from the Zodiac and other West Coast killers. Yet, adapting those lessons to a child-targeting murderer in upstate New York stretches every assumption they hold. On the back wall, a whiteboard lists early suspects: a drifter spotted near the canal towpath, a local gardener seen photographing children in parks, even a janitor at a nearby elementary school whose last name begins with M. You read each name in turn, picturing them among tufts of reeds and rusted guardrails, yet fingerprints and alibis snap each theory like brittle twigs. The gardener's camera contains only family portraits, and the janitor's night shift ends hours before any disappearance. A tense hush settles as Farrow produces a crude age regression sketch based on witness accounts. San, adult male, mid-30s, neat hair, glasses. You catch a whiff of stale coffee mingling with dry erase markers, and you fight a wave of nausea, realizing that this image could belong to anyone you passed on the street. Investigators still question whether that sketch helped narrow the field or simply clouded it with false matches. At one side table, you notice a folder marked psychiatric notes. Inside, FBI psychologists debate motives: a craving for control, a compulsion to leave a twisted calling card. You read theories that the killer's obsession with initials echoes narcissistic need to imprint his identity through letters rather than names. It's clinical language that rings colder than the river, yet you sense a flicker of understanding. This is more than murder. it's communication. Late that afternoon, you trail detectives to a warehouse where they interview a disgruntled local youth who once carved graffiti in Churchville. You watch as he drills into his hoodie pocket and trembles under lights. He denies any involvement, insisting the initials CC he once spray painted were a dare, not design. His eyes dart like trapped birds, but when confronted with timelines, he collapses in relief. The room exhales around you, and you realize how thin the line is between suspicion and guilt. Outside, the air tastes of rain, and you wander past a row of locked squad cars. One officer mentions a tip about a scrap of paper found in a mailbox, handwritten letters, MM, with a crude smiley face. That scrap vanished before evidence collection, yet it circulates in whispers as proof of the killer's taunt. You imagine that little page fluttering in wind, carrying mockery through silent streets. By evening, you sit on the station stoop, a stack of sketch pads on your lap. You flip through pages of nothing but empty circles, where initials should appear exactly, the pattern the killer avoided leaving behind. You think of the FBI's crime classification manual, still years from publication, and how no one yet has a glossary for this killer's alphabet. Night falls, and you stay late in the dim hallway, skimming through case files of other child abductions. Nationwide, you see Echo's initial-based hoaxes, copycat letters sent to small papers, but nothing matches Rochester's precise weave of initials and locations. Investigators still question whether those other cases share the same hand or if this is a uniquely local brand of terror. You stand, stretching aching legs, and peer through the glass door at your own reflections, someone thirsty for answers, battling shadows and speculation. You close the file on suspect, unknown, and step into the drizzle, head filled with faces, initials, sketches, and rumors. The night seems denser now, as though the fog itself holds the next clue in its folds. Somewhere beyond the street lamp glow, you sense that the profile will sharpen, details will emerge, suspects will rise and fall, and theories will collide. But tonight, all you carry is a nascent sketch of a mind twisted by letters, a half-formed portrait that points to nothing and everything. And you know that to catch a killer who plays by letters, you must first learn to read between them. You step onto the manicured cul-de-sac as evening drapes itself over neat lawns and identical ranch-style homes. Every front door is bolted, every window barred with wrought iron grills. You notice curfew signs tacked to community boards, warning that any child caught past 9 p.m. will be returned home with a fine. By the early 1970s, dozens of U.S. suburbs had passed juvenile curfew ordinances in response to rising crime rates, a trend publicized in the FBI's uniform crime reports, which by 1973 noted the nation's highest violent crime levels since World War II, with murder rates peaking at over 10 per 100,000 residents. That statistic is meant to alarm, but you feel it in the palpable hush swallowing this street. Inside picture-perfect windows, families cluster around radios tuned to late-night bulletins. The crackle of AM dispatches spills out beyond. Look out for blue sedan, Churchville Road. You press your ear to the glass, imagining the weight of every transmitted coordinate. Investigators still question whether these late-night transmissions saved time or simply amplified panic across every household. A rumor flutters through whispered gossip. A distraught neighbor painted CC in red chalk on her driveway, convinced Carmen Colón's initials would guide detectives to her lawn. No evidence corroborates it, yet the tale persists like ivy through mailboxes. You see the faded chalk lines scrawled under a dim lamppost, nearly erased by rain but impossible to ignore. You move on toward the community center, where folding chairs groan under the weight of anxious parents. Neighborhood watch groups, over 500 nationwide by 1973, gather here each week under buzzing fluorescents, clutching coffee and safety pamphlets. One volunteer slides a stack of homemade flyers across a folding table. Lock doors at dusk. Report strange markings. Teach children to scream. You pick one up, noting the childlike drawing of a stick figure bound by letters, each initial circled like a target. Across the hall, a retired schoolteacher murmurs that, in her day, children played until sunset without fear of abduction. In 1968, the first 911 system debuted in Alabama, but most Americans still dial local exchanges 7 digits when tragedy strikes. Here, the nearest emergency phone booth by the canal towpath is sealed off with caution tape, a grim monument to Wanda Walkowicz's last known footsteps. You slip outside for fresh air, the night thick with the scent of cut grass and exhaust. Fumes, you inhale deeply, letting the darkness press you against the cold metal of a fire hydrant. You exhale slowly, trying to steady the tremor in your chest before heading back inside again. You overhear a heated exchange. "We need patrols on every block," one neighbor insists. "Or maybe the killer will just move to a different street," another sighs. "This isn't just Churchville or Webster or Macedon, it's everywhere now." Their words echo off the plaster walls, each everywhere landing like a blow. On a side table, a battered Polaroid shows 3 mailboxes spray-painted with WWCC, MM in sloppy red letters. The caption admits it might be a stunt by local teens, but you can't shake the image. Somewhere, someone is dramatizing the killer's pattern, or the killer is dramatizing for them. You scan the room for faces, wondering how many are wearing a mask of composure and how many are scripting their own horror stories. A child's laughter drifts from an adjacent room where volunteers have set up coloring sheets depicting superheroes and shields. You pause to watch as a little girl carefully colors a shield bisected by the letters AK in crayon. Her pencil wavers, then she presses harder, as if fortifying herself against the unknown. You smile and feel a twinge of warmth before the distant wail of a siren snaps you back. The shield's bright lines blur in your vision. You exit onto the sidewalk again, footsteps echoing in the quiet. A lone police motorcycle idles under a street lamp, its blue light pulsing like a heartbeat. The officer inside checks his map, then lifts his visor and peers into the darkness, as if expecting the killer to emerge from the shadows. You stand behind him, feeling the pulse of your own fears, locked in that panorama of bleak metal and stale coffee. Before you cross the street, you glance up at a "Welcome to Webster" sign smeared with something red. "No chalk. This looks like paint." A neighbor tries to scrub it away, but the stain seeps deeper than stone. You wonder if it's a prank or a taunt. Either way, it feels like an insult carved into the county itself. You walk on, your coat collar turned up against the chill. Every gust of wind rattles the bare branches overhead, sounding eerily like letters clattering across a board. You imagine the killer sitting somewhere, watching this same wind carry the cries of frightened children. The street lamps flicker as though, in response, their halos fractured. When you reach your own front porch, you pause at the threshold and turn to face the street for one more heartbeat. Each locked door, each barred window, each whispered plan for safety at all feels like letters in a message you haven't yet deciphered. You close your eyes and listen. A distant door slams, a dog barks, a siren fades, and then silence. In that silence, you realize the community is caught in a web of locks and curfews spelled out in fear, and you're part of it. Every click of a bolt, every hastily erected fence, and every whispered warning is a new letter in the killer's deadly alphabet. And you know that the only way to break free is to start reading it for yourself. You slip into the waning light of the evidence room just as Detective Russo lifts a crisp white envelope from a steel cart. The precinct scanner has been abuzz all evening with talk of a taunting letter and unsigned confession, supposedly postmarked from nearby gates. You press your palm against the cool metal doorframe and watch as Rousseau carefully slices open. The flap, the blades whisper louder than any siren. This is no ordinary note. It's a gut punch cloaked in paper. The kind of cryptic message that has haunted true crime lore since the Lindbergh ransom letters first rattled the nation in 1932. In the lamplight, you see the envelope's edges are meticulously trimmed, as if scissors had been practiced in secret. The envelope bears no return address, only an imprecise postmark dated a week after Michelle Maenza disappeared. Inside lies a single sheet scrawled with block letters cut from magazines, each letter pasted at a slight angle, the margins uneven. You imagine the killer kneeling over a breakfast table, scissors and glue strewn about, piecing together his own signature. Fringe chatter claims the cutouts were from a discarded issue of TV Guide, but nobody has confirmed it. Investigators still question whether the ransom note-style assembly was genuine or a hoaxer's pathetic mimicry. You lean in as Rousseau reads aloud in a voice low enough to keep the words between these four walls. I am the alphabet, I speak in letters and hide in shadows. 3 marks I have made, 3 names I claim. CCWWMM will spell my fame. Your clues lie where ink meets page. The rhyme drips with menace, each line a hook pulling at your breath. You trace the glued letters with your finger, MCW, each initial echoing a child's name. You feel the weight of every syllable, knowing that a killer who writes his own poems is a predator confident in his theater of terror. Across the room, a crime scene print on the wall seems to shudder in response. Linguistics experts at Quantico once pioneered forensic stylistics in the late 1960s to analyze correspondence from serial offenders. But applying those early methods here in 1973 is a bold experiment. You picture analysts poring over line breaks and word choice, hunting for dialect clues or educational background. Investigators still question whether this letter holds fingerprints of the killer's mind or simply distracts from solid leads. The novelty of forensic linguistics offers hope, yet it also risks sending detectives down rabbit holes of syntax and semantics. You move closer to inspect the ink. It's a heavy black pigment, not fountain pen, but likely a commercial marker, another odd detail. A rumor as wild as wind says the marker was Glidden brand, the same cheap tool used in a vandalism spree at a church hall weeks earlier. No official report ties the two, but such a coincidence would fit the killer's penchant for showmanship. You pause, reminded that sometimes a sinister motif is just a prank gone too far. Yet here, it pulses with dreadful purpose. As Rousseau dusts the envelope for prints, you notice a faint scent of rosewater lingering in the folds, strangely perfumed flourish. It's the kind of touch that sounds poetic until you imagine a child's parents inhaling that same fragrance at the morgue. This detail slipped past initial inventories and now fuels a small cult following of true crime aficionados who pore over every nuance. They call it the rose cipher, insisting it matches nothing in local florist records. Investigators still question whether the scent was genuine or an accidental residue from some unrelated object. You step back and let the silence settle between you. For a moment, the only sound is the soft hum of the refrigerator unit preserving biological samples and the distant echo of a closing cell door. Your heartbeat slows as you contemplate the killer's boldness-staunting police with rhymes and riddles, daring them to play a deadly crossword. A breath escapes your lips, misting the glass case holding Wanda's sweater, companion relic to this sinister note. Later, the precinct's bulletin board is plastered with copies of the letter. Officers circle words in red ink, letters, shadows, clues, trying to decode some hidden pattern. Townsfolk pore over newspaper reproductions, sending in postcards with speculations and pleas. You scroll through the crowdsourced theories, noting suggestions that the letter's rhyme scheme hints at the killer's initials backward, or that the odd word page signals a dumping site near the public library. Each idea is a letter in an unsent message, and you feel the slow burn of frustration. Midnight approaches, and you find yourself alone in the parking lot, rain beginning to patter against the hood of your car. You clutch the letter in your coat pocket, its edges poking like small knives. Street lamps turn on one by one, their halos blurred by wet lenses. You lift the envelope to the light, its surface dark with challenge. You wonder how many more letters the killer will write, how many more poems he'll brand into the city's night dot in the hush. You realize that this letter was never meant to be a klutz, a proclamation of power. The killer writes not to conceal but to reveal himself in his own twisted lexicon. You slide the envelope back into your pocket and ease into the driver's seat, engine ticking as it cools. Rain taps a staccato on the windshield, sounding to you like letters dropping onto a page. You start the car and pull into the wet street, headlights carving paths through the dark. The cryptic game has begun, and you know that if you want to catch a killer who plays by letters, you'll have to learn to speak his language, rewrite the rules. You settle into a hard-backed chair in a cramped interview room, the flicker of a single bulb overhead casting jittery shadows on the walls. Across from you sits a stocky man in his mid-40s, local handyman named Earl Monroe, whose breath smells faintly of coffee and engine oil. He was flagged by an anonymous tip to have been seen near the canal towpath the night Michelle Maenza vanished, but his alibi hinges on tinkering under a '65 Chevy Nova in his garage. You watch detectives swivel between skepticism and hope, each glance a silent question. Could this be the break they need? By 1973, more than 80% of US law enforcement agencies owned a polygraph machine, and examiners touted its accuracy. For weeding out lies a mainstream fact that gave every suspect a trembling reason to fear the needle. Monroe insists he's innocent, hands fluttering as if warding off an unseen flame. You lean forward, noting the faint scar on his wrist and the calloused knuckles that suggest years of manual labor. He tells a halting story of engine parts and spilled oil, yet a peculiar detail sticks with you. He claims to have found a monogrammed handkerchief embroidered M tucked into a loose floorboard in his workshop. A fringe whisper threads through rumor circles that this very handkerchief once bore a child's tear-stained fingerprint, but nobody recovered prints convincing enough to hold up in court. Investigators still question whether that handkerchief was genuine evidence or a clever plant by someone wanting to misdirect the probe. As Monroe's story unravels, a detective offhandedly mentions a local radio contest where callers could win Scrabble sets by guessing a daily mystery initial. The implication makes you shiver. Was someone using a children's game to mock the investigation? You imagine the killer grinning over the airwaves, letters tumbling like bones in a jar. Later that afternoon, you join a pair of younger officers on a stakeout at a rundown house just outside Rochester's city limits. The house belonged to a reclusive mail carrier whose route traced every neighborhood where a victim was found. You sip lukewarm coffee from a styrofoam cup as they explain how the suspect's shifts overlapped each disappearance. The monotony of waiting at a darkened window mimics the slow drip of an unseen facet door, persistent, maddening dot across the street. Porch lights blink on at exactly 9 p.m., and you wonder if the driver of that mail truck ever noticed children hurrying indoors. A neighbor's motion sensor lamp flares unexpectedly, startling you as if the night itself were watching. Detectives radio in that the carrier's alibi checks out. He was making deliveries for his supervisor. Receipts time-stamped and witnesses sworn. No handkerchief, no Scrabble tiles, no slivers of glue from ransom notes. Just the hush of disappointment. On the drive back to headquarters, you pass an old church where an outraged congregant scrawled XYZ+3 on the brick facade, cryptic accusation no one deciphers. The church's pastor later claimed the letters referred to 3 innocents lost to the killer, but that too fizzled under scrutiny. You recall that nationwide in 1972, the FBI logged almost 600 cases of hoax letters sent to police. A fluke of loose lips and overzealous fiction, but Rochester's ordeal felt far too real. That evening, you pore over evidence boards lit by desk lamps, tracing suspect photos with a dull pencil. A detective tacks up a faded carnival ticket stub found near a dump seater, tiny remnant that promised to link the killer to a traveling fair. Fringe theorists latched onto that ticket, arguing the Leopold and Loeb scarecrow murders had once involved fairgrounds. But here it seems just another rabbit hole. Investigators still question whether that carnival tip was a crucial insight, or an amusing detour born of desperation in a darker corner. You find notes on an unvetted informant who claimed the killer attended Victorian-era reenactments in the Finger Lakes. The informant's sketches show a tall figure in horn-rimmed glasses chanting initials. Beneath gas lamp glow a scenario so theatrical it reads like gothic fanfiction. Most dismiss it as fantasy, yet you can't help picturing those lamplights humming in the dusk, casting long shadows that could hide any number of horrors by midnight. The bullpen has emptied desks, abandoned under the hum of fluorescent lights. You're alone with files, each sheet a testament to a lead that flickered, then died. You'll run a finger along the names Carmen Colón, Wanda Walkowicz, and Michelle Maenza printed on victim profiles and feel the weight of every unanswered question. The fan above clicks in staccato, a mechanical heartbeat reminding you time is slipping away. You gather your notes, handwritten jottings of polygraph results, ticket stubs, rumor, fragment sand, slip them into a manila folder. You step outside into a crisp November night, the air sharp enough to taste metal. Moonlight gleams on the canal's still surface, and you imagine a pair of small sneakers treading its bank. You press your palm to the cold railing, feeling the chill as if it were the killer's silent promise to strike again in that moment. You realize that every twist and dead end has one thing in common. The killer's pattern remains as elusive as smoke. He toys with the city, scattering clues that vanish when you reach for them. And you know that to break free from this labyrinth of letters, you must learn to distinguish genuine signals from the noise of fear and rewrite the rules of the hunt. You step into a hushed library stacked with case files and musty books. The lamp's amber glow casting long shadows across a scarred oak desk. Silhouettes of leather-bound volumes line the shelf stones on criminology that predate even the term serial killer. You reach for a volume on forensic science and trace your fingertip over the spine, feeling the raised lettering of blood and fibers in crime analysis, a field that only gained traction after the 1950s, when investigators began matching fibers and blood types from suspects to crime scenes, without DNA profiling, which wouldn't arrive until the mid-1980s. These early methods were the best hope detectives had to connect a suspect to a victim's world. You flip open a file, labeled other cases, and find articles about crimes in other counties, 2 toddlers in Buffalo, an elderly woman in Syracuse siege, reported in some circles as follow-ups to the alphabet pattern. Fringe theorists whisper that the same twisted mind authored both sets of murders, claiming that 3 letters here and 2 there spell out an ominous code. One particularly wild rumor suggests the killer was inspired by the Zodiac's cryptograms, sending him into upstate New York to craft his own alphabetic riddle. You imagine a figure hunched over a puzzle, ink and scissors strewn about like fallen leaves. Investigators still question whether linking these disparate crimes to the alphabet pattern is anything more than sensationalism, or whether it dilutes focus on concrete evidence. As you skim the margin notes, you see skeptical editors from the Democrat and Chronicle scrawling speculation beside each headline. You lean back in a creaking chair and let the silence press against your eardrums, the world outside fading to a dull thrum. A loose stack of newspaper clippings lies next to a battered typewriter. One clipping recounts a 1974 case in a Pennsylvania farm town where initials were carved into fence posts, PP, matching the victim's name, but the local sheriff quickly declared it an unrelated act of vandalism. Yet the story resurfaced among true crime aficionados who found comfort in patterns where none existed. You press your palm against the cool metal of a filing cabinet, imagining the killer's delight if he knew his crime had spawned copycats and copycats of copycats. In the corner, a telephone receiver lies ominously off the hook. You lift it, half expecting a scratchy voice spelling out another set of initials. Instead, there's only static, a reminder that communication can be both deliverance and deception. You set it down gently, mindful of the receiver's cord tangling like a snare. You rise and wander toward a faded map of Monroe County pinned to the wall. Someone has circled Churchville, Webster, and Macedon in red ink, then drawn speculative lines to other towns: Lockport, Elmira, Batavia. Beneath the map, a detective's note reads, "Pattern or pareidolia." The human tendency to see meaningful connections in random data. You step closer, studying each red line until they blur into a crimson web. Any one of those sites could be a dumping ground, a ploy, or simply coincidence. A whisper of movement catches your ear, and you glance over at a dusty recorder playing an unfinished transcription, an anonymous caller, listing initials and locations, suggesting the killer had an accomplice. You press pause and listen. The caller claims to have been in love with one of the victims and to have planted evidence to mislead investigators. The allegation is as flimsy as a rumor, but you imagine a courtroom where such testimony could shatter alibis and warp truth. You pause to catch your breath, letting the ambient hum of the overhead light calm your racing thoughts. The lamp's glow flickers, and for a moment you wonder if the room itself is breathing, inhaling suspicion and exhaling doubt. The hush is almost soothing until you remember why you came here. You gather a thin dossier of fringe materials, photocopies of conspiracy theory newsletters, tortured analyses of killers' psychology, even a pamphlet claiming the murders were sacrifices in some occult alphabet ritual. The pamphlet's brochure cover features runic symbols and red ink spelling A gives M, implying that the killer's final letter remained unknown. You toss it back onto the desk, unsettled by how icily your eyes traced those twisting shapes. Investigators still question whether pursuing these theories wastes precious time and resources, or whether hidden truths might lurk beneath the outlandish claims. You glance at your reflection in the library window, your face framed by rows of encyclopedias, and you wonder how long it takes for obsession to become its own kind of madness. Smooth breaths slow your heartbeat. You close your eyes and feel the leather spine of the map under your fingertips, the weight of every red circle pressing down on your mind. In this quiet pause, you almost believe the pattern could hold real answers, till you remind yourself that murderers don't always follow a script. You rub your temples, feeling the slight grit of paper ink beneath your fingernails. A soft tap at the door break makes you start, and you glance over to see Detective Larson entering with new lab results. He lays down a report confirming that fiber samples from Buffalo and Syracuse victims don't match those from Rochester. Empirical rebuttal to the copycat theory. You exhale, letting tension roll from your shoulders, as hope flickers that maybe, just maybe, narrowing the scope could bring you closer to the truth here at home. You smile at Larson with a tired gratitude, aware that in true crime, as in any puzzle, relief often arrives through elimination rather than confirmation. The map's red lines shrink in your mind's eye, focusing back on the 3 original towns. You trace them once more, then cover the map with your hand, signifying that the real mystery remains here in Monroe County. You step back into the hallway, the clipboard in your hand heavy with renewed purpose. The lamp behind you snaps on and off in a slow, stuttering, uncanny echo of a faulty Morse code. You catch yourself leaning forward, coaxing meaning from the flicker, until you laugh softly, reminding yourself that not every message is meant for us to decode. In the hush of the corridor, you realize that myth and reality coalesce in every rumor and every refutation. The alphabet murders have grown into legend, partly because people crave patterns to tame chaos. And yet the truest path forward lies in discarding noise and focusing on the evidence that won't disappear. As you walk toward the door, you feel the soft weight of files in your bagger promise that tomorrow's work will unspool fresh leads. The hallway light steadies, its glow warming the walls. You reach for the doorknob and pause, knowing that beyond this threshold lies both frustration and possibility. You push open the door, stepping into the next phase of this deadly game, determined to read only the letters that matter. You slip into the back seat of an unmarked sedan as dusk bleeds into night, the engine idling with a placid hum. Across the front seats, 2 detectives in plain clothes adjust their earpieces and exchange quiet nods. By 1973, undercover decoy operations had become a staple in many departments. Techniques honed since the Prohibition era, stings to bait predators into revealing themselves. Tonight, you're the bait, playing the part of a lone teenager walking home from a late study session, flanked only by the soft glow of headlights and the steady drone of cicadas. Your pulse thrums beneath the fabric of your jacket as the car drifts towards Seneca Park Road, the same lane where Carmen Colón vanished. A breeze carries the scent of summer blooms, honeysuckle, and fresh-cut grass, suspecting accomplices to what could become a trap. The detectives coached you on every detail. Walk with a book in hand, glance over your shoulder every few steps, hum a lullaby under your breath. You practice the tune now, feeling the notes flutter in your throat like moths in a lantern dot. Past midnight, you step onto the cracked sidewalk, your boots crunching gravel. One detective follows 10 paces behind, flashlight tucked low in his grip. The other remains in the car, radio positioned just outside the window. Street lamps stretch their halos across the pavement, turning opal mist into sporadic pools of light. You breathe in the night air, tasting its sharp Tangan invisible boundary, where safety bleeds into suspicion. Rumor has it, the killer once slipped a note under a meter maid's windshield wiper, mimicking a parking ticket to taunt authorities. Fringe whispers in shadowed corners say he laughed as the meter maid peeled the paper, discovering only cut-out letters spelling WW. Beneath the glass, you tuck that image into your mind as a cautionary tale. The predator isn't above bricolage theater, using everyday objects to fan his own legend. You walk past a cluster of oak trees whose leaves rattle like distant applause. Your heart hammers in your ears as you reach the canal, towpath, its guardrail slick with dew. The detective's beam traces ripples in the water. Each flicker resembles an initial, dancing on the surface before dissolving into darkness. Investigators still question whether decoy tactics risk pushing the killer into more brutal violence, but tonight the priority is drawing him out. You pause beneath a battered lamppost and raise your book to your face, pretending to read. The pages shift in your trembling fingers, Agatha Christie's finest, chosen for its comforting familiarity. A moth flutters close, its wings brushing your cheek, and you lift your head, startled by the brush of silk. In that instant, you sense someone watching, a silhouette beyond the fence, blending with the shadows. Your breath catches. The detective behind you inches forward, his flashlight sweeping the perimeter. You tuck the book under your arm, letting the brim of your hood obscure your profile. A car door clicks shut in the distance, and you tense, training your gaze on the dark shape of parked squad cars just off the beaten path. This is the junction between hunter and hunted, each heartbeat a drum roll in the stifling hush. You step forward again, heels tapping in a steady rhythm. In your ear, the radio crackles. Alpha team in position. Maintain visual. The detective's voice is clipped, professional, no hint of the adrenaline that coils in your gut. You smile, trying to suppress the tremor in your lips, and hum a softer tune. The lullaby feels absurd here, a contradiction to the dread that coils through every blade of grass. At the far end of the path, you spot a figure leaning against a willow trunk, tall, lean, cap pulled low. The detective flicks his light up and down, illuminating boots, a sloped shoulder, a hand tucked into a coat pocket. Your chest tightens as you realize this could be him, the letter-playing monster who turned initials into death sentences. You close your eyes for a moment, recalling the FBI's behavioral science unit profile that described a methodical killer who favored pattern over impulse. This silhouette fits, still a sculpture, watching, waiting for the right moment to strike. The detective beside you grips your arm, whispering, "Stay calm. He's yours to draw in." You step forward, voice soft, "Hello." It's a whisper threaded with bravado, but inside you're unspooling. The figure straightens, tilting his head as though curious about the stranger beneath the hood. You swallow, forcing a steady breath. I got lost. Can you help me find Exchange Boulevard? The shadow moves, first one foot, then the other, gliding across gravel, in the lamplight. You catch a flash of something in his hand, metallic, slender. Your heart careens. The detective behind you murmurs, "Now," and you pivot, stumbling back toward the squad cars. Headlights flare as plainclothes officers emerge, surrounding the figure. He tenses, scanning each corridor of light, and throws up his hands then bolts toward the canal. You hear shouts, the slap of boots on concrete, and you duck behind the wagon, pressing your back to the cold metal. Sirens wail, a high-pitched requiem slicing the night. A detective yanks you toward cover as the figure leaps over the guardrail. You catch a glimpse of dark jeans, a hooded jacket flapping like a cloak, and then he's gone, dissolving into the black water's edge. Your breath shards in your chest, and you gulp cold air as officers fan out in pursuit. Flashlights boomeranging through reeds. Minutes pass like hours until the chase ebbs. A detective returns, muddy at the knees, shaking his head. "No sign of him," he says, voice hollow. You sink to the ground, boots cracking on gravel, and your hands go to your mouth to staunch a sob you didn't know you had. Later, in the precinct's debrief room, you press your palms to the table's laminate surface, feeling its antiseptic smoothness. Maps are strewn across the walls, pins flickered with red heads, marking stakeout locations. You replay each step, the hush before you spoke, the tilt of his head, the glint in his hand. A forensic note taped to the corner of the whiteboard reminds investigators to check mud samples from canal bank. Another thread. You'll pull tomorrow. You lift your eyes to the detectives watching you. One murmurs, "Good work, drawing him out. We saw his silhouette." You nod, voiced raw. He had something in his hand, a long metal rod. Another tilts his head. Could be a pry bar, a scrap metal tool. If he used it, we might find traces of broken nails or splintered wood at his next dump site. A medical examiner's report lies open on the table. Fibers from Michelle Maenza's sweater matched fibers found on Carmen's glove. A rare commonality. It's the first concrete link across to Cinza, mainstream fact that could break the case wide open. You trace the typed words with your fingertip, feeling the battered edges of the page. Outside, rain begins to patter against the windows. You cradle a paper cup of lukewarm coffee, its bitter aroma mingling with the scent of wet pavement. You stare at the pour-over mark on the wall, coffee stains forming a rough circle that resembles a child's scrawl. You resist the urge to trace its outline, knowing that every symbol here is a siren pulling you toward obsession. As you leave the station in the early hours, the world is hushed and slick with rain. You pull your collar up and inhale deep. Somewhere beyond the street lamps, the killer watches, learning from this failed decoy. But you've seen enough: his silhouette, his tools, the cadence of his patience. You step into the night, resolve coiling in your chest. Tomorrow, you'll scour every tool shed and canal bank until those fibers lead you to his door. You slip into the cold case conference room just as dusk bleeds through the blinds, casting long slats of orange light across a rectangular table strewn with yellowed files. The atmosphere tastes of stale coffee and old paper, each file folder a monument to grief frozen in time. By the early 2010s, advances in DNA profiling and national fingerprint databases had reignited investigations into decades-old murders, giving hope that killers once thought lost to history could finally face justice. Tonight, You're here to confront the man who many whisper about in hushed corridors. Joseph Nasso. Detectives circle photographs of Nasso now, in his 70s, pinned beside images of Carmen Colón, Wanda Walkowicz, and Michelle Maenza. His California prison jumpsuit is a stark contrast to the grainy 70s snapshots of the girls. Yet uncanny parallels emerge. Nasso was arrested in 2010 and convicted in 2013 for the murders of 4 women whose initials matched their crime scenes. Echo of Rochester's chilling pattern. It's a mainstream fact that prosecutors relied on DNA and fiber evidence to tie him to those killings. But here, in Monroe County, only fragments of that science remain. You lean over the map of dump sites, fingertips tracing the red circles around Churchville, Webster, and Macedon. A laminated printout shows Nasso's last known address in Albany, where he ran a small photo studio just a day's drive from Rochester in the early 70s. A fringe rumor suggests he attended summer art fairs in Highland Park, charming visitors with sepia-toned portraits before slipping away to stalk a child beneath the carousel's twinkle lights. Investigators still question whether those stories of an itinerant portraitist hold any weight, or if they're simply the imaginative fabrications of true crime aficionados. Craving pattern. You settle into a plastic chair as Sergeant Daniels clicks through a slideshow of correspondence seized from Nasso's California home. Letters cut from magazines, crude ransom-style missives spelled out in mismatched letters. The style mirrors the so-called Rose cipher note that arrived in Rochester after Michelle Maenza's body was discovered. The paper's faint rosewater scent was never fully explained. But here you hold a scanned copy of one of Nasso's handwritten journals, in which he speaks of letters as legacies. He writes, "Each life I touch becomes part of my tapestry of initials." It sends a shiver that lodges behind your ribs at one end of the table. A junior detective points out that Nasso's known victims in California bore the initials JC, MLTD, and JS. A broader alphabetic pattern that transcends 3 local cases. A map overlays those California sites with dotted lines, stretching northeast to Rochester, audacious suggestion that Nassos reached crossed state lines. You close your eyes for a moment, picturing the transcontinental road trips of a killer who measured bodies like itineraries. A veteran investigator exhales and admits, "We have no travel records placing Nasso here in 71, 73. Yet a single train ticket stub found in his possessions for December 1972, stamped New York Station, was never fully traced. Fringe theorists argue it proves he visited Rochester that winter, perhaps scouting his next victim under the guise of holiday tourism. Investigators still question whether that ticket stub is more than a tourist memento war, if it's the faintest thread tying Nasso to Monroe County. You reach for a clear evidence bag containing a single Scrabble tile engraved with W. It was pulled from cold case archives after Nasso's conviction, sent to Quantico for re-examination. You hold it gingerly, noting the chipped edge and the grain of its hardwood surface. DNA tests came back inconclusive, too little biological material to yield a profile, but the tile's provenance inspired this very meeting. You place it on the table and watch its shadow stretch beneath your hand. A tangible ghost of the past. Across the room, someone flips to a report from the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit in 2012. Agents there created a comparative profile, assessing Nasso's psychological traits against the Midwest victims' case files. The report notes similarities in methodical planning, the use of symbolic signatures, and a predilection for leaving theatrical clues. That behavioral profile was the same. Emerging science you studied back in Section 6, now refined with decades of data. It's a mainstream point that modern profilers credit with cracking the BTK and Green River cases. Yet here, it offers only tantalizing hints. You stand and pace between rows of chairs, boots clicking on linoleum. The open debate hangs heavy in the air. Investigators still question whether linking Nassau to the Alphabet murders stretches the evidence beyond reason, or whether we're willfully ignoring the unsettling coincidences that scream his guilt. You catch your reflection in a glass cabinet full of archived case binders, a silhouette framed by files, as much a part of this cold labyrinth as the suspect himself. A soft knock at the door draws your attention. It's the county coroner, carrying slides of fabric fibers lifted from Wanda Walkowicz's coat threads that matched carpet samples from Nassau's studio in Albany. The match was never entered into evidence because the carpet was installed after 1973, a detail that muddied the chain of custody. The coroner shrugs apologetically. It seemed circumstantial at best back then. That concession tastes metallic on your tongue, like blood mingled with regret. A hush follows as Daniels clears his throat and outlines a proposal. Reopen the files, retest any surviving fibers and tiles, and interview elderly neighbors who remembered a traveling photographer. You imagine knocking on doors in Churchville neighborhoods, probing memories frozen by time, asking, "Do you recall anyone with a camera cart rolling down your street?" You steel yourself, knowing some stories hide behind polite smiles and closed shutters. You return to the table where the photo of Nassau's jumpsuit lies beside the girl's portraits. The contrast is stark grey prison garb against black and white childhood snapshots. You close your eyes and breathe deeply, inhaling the stale air of decades worth of fear and frustration. You picture Nassau behind bars in California, the only place where his initials truly spelled out justice. In that moment, your resolve coalesces. You will champion the reopening of Rochester's cold case with the tenacity of an Albany prosecutor and the care of a mother searching for her lost daughter. You'll chase down every fiber, scrutinize every magazine clipping, and trace every rumor back to its source. The map on the wall may bear the towns of Churchville, Webster, and Macedon. But your next step will be to redraw its lines, to carve a path that leads straight to Nassau's front door. You gather the Scrabble tile, the fiber slides, and the printouts into a new manila folder labeled Nasal Review. As you tuck it under your arm, the last rays of sunset vanish, leaving the room bathed in fluorescent white. You push back your chair, its legs scraping like distant fingernails on chalkboard, and walk toward the door. Tonight, the cold case is no longer frozen, it's ignited. You enter the cavernous archives room of the Monroe County Cold Case Unit, where dust motes dance in shafts of late afternoon sun slicing through high windows. Rows of metal shelves, groan under the weight of faded file boxes, each labeled with a victim's name, date, and a scrawl, Unsolved. You trail your fingertips along the spine of a box marked Alphabet Killings, Colón, Walkowicz, Maenza, feeling the grit of decades-old ink cling to your nails. In 1980, the first dedicated cold case squads began appearing in police departments nationwide, after law enforcement realized that revisiting unsolved crimes with fresh eyes could yield breakthroughs. Yet here you stand in the aftermath of the early 70s murders, when that idea was still years away. The files are bound by tarnished clips, their pages yellowed by time and the promise of progress long since faded. You inhale the musty scent of archive paper and stale coffee. all that remains of tireless efforts that fizzled as the trail went. A rumor persists that, in the mid-1970s, a self-styled psychic held a seance in the old Rochester armory, claiming to contact the spirits of the girls by reciting their initials backwards, CCWWMM, in reverse order. Fringe enthusiasts swear the medium uttered a name, but no transcript survives, and mainstream law enforcement dismissed it as charlatanism. You want to believe in every clue, even the absurd ones, but you remind yourself that deliberate deceit can masquerade as the supernatural. You spread open a dusty ledger on a steel table, entries of interviews that ended in dead ends, tips that evaporated under cross-examination, and suspects who were absolved by alibi or died before charges could stick. Each line is a monument to frustration. Silence presses against the bunker's concrete walls, punctuated by the hum of a single fluorescent tube overhead. You notice water stains on the ceiling, a subtle reminder that even this fortress of memory is slowly leaking away. Investigators still question whether re-examining old physical evidence is worth the risk of contamination, or if it's better to let history lie undisturbed. You weigh the cost of opening boxes' brittle folders that crumble under pressure against the hope that new forensic techniques, like ELISA and immunoassays developed in the early 70s, could reveal biological traces long thought beyond detection. Across the room, a grainy photograph pinned to a bulletin board catches your eye. It shows a cardboard sign scrawled with any letter can be a clue in jagged red marker, propped against a tree trunk where Michelle Maenza's body was found. That image circulated in true crime zines. Before the internet, a small circulation. Underground newsletter that fetishized the case's letter pattern. You trace the curves of each letter with your gaze, imagining the hand that painted them in a clandestine midnight ritual. A soft hum stirs you from reverie as your phone buzzes an alert that a lab report is ready for review. You pocket the device and crane your neck toward a chalkboard scrawled with recent footnotes. Retest glove DNA. GI's map overlay pending. Request search warrant for abandoned warehouse on Baltic SD. Modern policing is inching its way here. Digital forensics, geospatial analytics, but the data you need lies buried beneath this archive's foundation. You push off from the table and step toward the motion sensor light that flickers as you pass. In a corner, under a layer of dust, you find a plastic evidence bag containing a single snapped pencil edgely dropped by Carmen Colón, abductor. It's a mundane object turned macabre relic. You hold it gingerly, noticing the graphite tip worn smooth, as though the killer sketched out a map of his madness. It should have been entered into evidence, but the chain of custody note reveals it was misfiled in miscellaneous. Such clerical errors transformed promising leads into footnotes. Later that week, you attend a city council briefing where the mayor pledges to allocate funds for cold case review, promising an all-hands task force. The chamber's oak panels echo with reluctant applause, yet you sense the promise will dissolve unless someone follows through. You suppress a laugh at the line between rhetorical flourish and real action. A reporter whispers that last year's budget cut gutted forensic labs, leaving them with a single functional centrifuge. It's a mainstream dilemma. Politics often outran resources, peppering hope with empty slogans. That evening, you visit the modest home of Carmen Colón's aunt. The floral wallpaper peels at the edges, and family photographs cluster on a sagging mantelpiece. You sit in a threadbare armchair, watching as she recounts each birthday missed, each milestone unanswered. The room smells of old perfume and sorrow. "They were just letters to me," she whispers, "but they meant my little girl." You offer a gentle nod, aware that empathy can be as vital as evidence. You carry her grief like another scrap of paper, folded and weighted. The hum of air conditioning vents resonates like distant radio static. You close your eyes and imagine the buzz of 70s ham radios and CB chatter, channels once used to coordinate searches, now silent. The only voices echoing here are your own footsteps and the soft click of a digital recorder logging your observations. Each click feels like a heartbeat, a measure of time slipping through your grasp. You exhale, and the air tastes dry and sterile. The cold case unit's leader enters, his expression unreadable. He surveys the room, nodding at each area of stagnation. He laments that witness memories degrade by 1 to 2% a year. A fact from memory psychology studies in 1973, making human recollection unreliable in long unsolved crimes. You both recognize the irony. Memories are both evidence and error. Your colleagues depart one by one, slipping into the corridor's twilight. You linger a moment, closing the ledger and securing it in a lockbox. You tap the glass of the box, thoughtfully watching your reflection blur. You realize that the impasse here is not for lack of effort, but for the passage of time itself, eroding every hint. You gather a bundle of case files and head for the door, flicking off lights in silence. Each switch leaves another corner of the room to shadow. As you cross the threshold, the last fluorescent flickers in uneven pulses, like the erratic pattern of a desperate mind. You step into the hallway, where the echo of your shoes fades into. Quiet outside, the evening sky is streaked with amber and violet. You pause, breathing in the cool dusk, letting the scent of mulching leaves fill your lungs. Somewhere beyond the archives and the glimmer of new technologies, the cold case waits for someone to reignite its embers. And you know that, despite the impasse, the trail remains. You just have to keep reading between the letters. You wander through Rochester's East End as twilight melts into night, the air humming with distant traffic and murmured stories. Modern lampposts flicker in patterned intervals. Some say they pulse with the killer's initials, and you feel the city's old wounds throb beneath fresh pavement. Sidewalk cafes spill soft jazz onto the streets, their tables scattered with tourists clutching guidebooks to the alphabet killings, that series of child murders still woven into the city's memory. You pause by a canal-side bench, where someone has left a small pile of scrabbled tiles, arranged in CCW/WMN, like a silent vigil by the late 1990s. True crime had migrated from paperback bestsellers to cable television specials and nascent internet forums, capturing millions of viewers and prompting nationwide discussions about cold cases and justice. The genre's rise fueled renewed interest in long unsolved mysteries, and Rochester's own tragedies found a second life in the glare of the spotlight. You sense how that surge of media scrutiny rewrote the city's relationship with its past. Even as families still grieved in private, a quirky rumor drifts through the dark. Some locals claim that, at precisely 11:15 p.m., the old railroad bridge by Exchange Boulevard emits a childlike giggle, as though a ghostly playmate still roams there. Fringe enthusiasts swear they've captured the sound on digital recorders, though skeptics scoff at poor acoustics or trick-of-the-wind explanations. Investigators still question whether these alleged recordings hold genuine echoes of the victims or whether they're merely the product of eager minds overlaying hope onto Static Hiss. In Canal Street Park. You brush fingertips over a memorial plaque that bears no names, only 3 engraved letters in an interlocking design. Nearby, a local artist has painted a mural of abstract letters twisting into rivers, each stroke tinted with red echoes of the past. Visitors snap photos for social media, tagging #AlphabetLegacy, even as survivors steer clear of the spectacle. You inhale the scent of wet earth mixed with spray paint and feel a pang. How easily remembrance drifts into performance. You drift into a narrow alley where a single window glows behind iron bars. A woman sits inside, typing on an antique typewriter mounted against the ceiling, homage to the ransom-style notes once sent to police. Her fingertips strike each key with deliberation, and you imagine her crafting her own tribute to the city's darkest chapter. In 1980, typewriter ribbons were still common evidence. But today they're anachronistic relics coveted by collectors. That shift reminds you how both tools and tactics evolve, yet fear clings to familiar shapes. A soft breeze brings the aroma of freshly roasted coffee from a cafe around the corner. You step inside, ordering a latte topped with a chocolate syrup initial A, and watch baristas fumble with foam, as if hesitant to stamp the killer's monogram onto someone's comforting cup. The clink of ceramic and hush of conversation feel grounding, a momentary bulwark against the unsettling tales swirling outside. As you step back onto the sidewalk, you pass a sealed payphone still tethered to a brick wall, its receiver yellowed and cord braided like a twisted rope. In the 1970s, fewer than 10% of families had private phones, so payphones played a crucial role in reporting emergencies, and this one might have once dialed the only glimpse of a fleeing suspect. You press your palm to its cool metal, imagining the frantic finger dialing that never reached help in time. Night deepens, and you find yourself drawn to the river's edge, where a small group gathers for a ghost tour. The guide's whispery narration winds through shadowed walkways, tales of flickering lights, phantom footprints, and letters scrawled on walls by unseen hands. You watch their lantern beams tremble over the water and feel a chill that has nothing to do with the breeze. Whether these tours heal or exploit the past, they ensure the alphabet killings remain alive in collective memory. You pause beneath a street lamp whose glow fractures through veined glass, casting fractured letters across the cobblestones. Each shard of light feels like a fragment of a message, incomplete and urgent. In that moment, you realize how the legacy of fear has become part of the city's heartbeat, undercurrent threading through murals, memorials, murals, and whispered tales. And you know that, no matter how many years pass, those letters will never vanish from the spaces where the city breathes its history. You stand at the edge of Maplewood Park as late afternoon light fades into an encroaching dusk, the air thick with the scent of damp earth and fading summer blooms. In the hush, you feel the weight of a city still breathing after decades of dread. The river's current murmurs beside you, each ripple whispering the names of 3 lost girls, that refused to vanish from the town's memory. It's 1975, and the term serial killer was only just coined by FBI agent Robert Ressler. Yet here you are, staring at a pattern that predates even the language meant to describe it. You trace your finger along the wrought iron fence where a few scratches remained allegedly carved by a neighborhood teen who claimed he saw strange symbols one night. Fringe theorists insist those etchings form part of an occult alphabet ritual, but no credible evidence ever surfaced, and mainstream investigators dismissed them as prankster graffiti. Investigators still question whether such rumors distract from solid leads or point to a darker undercurrent of collective guilt. Beyond the fence, the canal towpath stretches in shadow, lined with dew-slick grass. You follow its curve, your footsteps soft against the gravel, recalling that every rumored clue scrabbled tiles, red balloons, cryptic letters in chalkers, always dissolved into noise when held up to scrutiny. That fractured lullaby of rumor and reality lingers in the air, teasing you with what might have been and reminding you of how easily coincidence can masquerade as design. A weathered sign marks the spot where Michelle Maenza was found, its letters faded by sun and rain. You lean against its post, feeling the cool metal through your coat. In 1973, public interest in forensic science was surging, fired by high-profile cases like the Mafia's car bombings and the Eastern State Penitentiary forensics. Yet, here in Monroe County, much of the evidence was dismissed as unstable. You inhaled deeply, tasting the metallic temps of regret mingled with autumn's crisp breath. You lift your gaze to the treetops, branches silhouetted against a bruised sky. That faint whisper of wind rustles leaves like loose papers, and you almost expect to see a message scrawled in red among the branches. The memory of Detective Rochester theorized, signature letters arranged like a dance of death, haunts you still. You feel its echo in each shifting shadow, each flicker of lamplight. A few yards ahead, the path opens to a small clearing where community members once gathered, with candles. A commemorative plaque now stands there, 3 interlocking rings, each inscribed with an initial. You step forward, the plaque's bronze surface cool under your palm. This site draws mourners and skeptics alike, pilgrims in search of closure, thrill-seekers chasing free songs of fear. You sense the tension between remembrance and spectacle, between reverence and exploitation. You close your eyes and picture Carmen, Wanda, and Michelle walking these paths on distant afternoons, their laughter scattering like petals in the breeze. In that moment, the hush feels like reverence, a breath held in memory across generations. One community elder once claimed the river's current spells out initials if you follow its bends from above, a fanciful theory built on pareidolia. It never held legal weight, yet people still climb bridges at dawn, peer into dark water, and listen for faint voices. You take a steady breath and open your eyes to the gathering gloom. The trees commit you to shadow, but your resolve shines. Clear, you know that the true clues are those that withstand scrutiny, fibers matched in a lab. A Scrabble tile preserved in a file, the crisscross of towns on a map that still refuses to add a 4th point. You tuck a folded flyer into your coat pocket, its edges frayed from years of handling, and feel its paper promise. Answers are out there in the distance. A lone street lamp flickers to life, its light carving a pool of gold on the path. You step into it, your footprint the only disturbance in the gravel. A second-person whisper guides you. Every unanswered question is a summons to look closer, to wade into the current of facts and rumors until the truth surfaces. You sense the rhythmic pulse of your own heartbeat aligning with the river's flow. Investigators still question whether reopening cold files risks false hope, or if it may yet unearth the killer's hidden trail. You lift your hand to your ear, as if listening for a clue, anything that might break the silence. The wind murmurs past, carrying the echo of lessons learned. Obsession can cloud evidence, and fear can ripple like shadows on water. But persistence carves channels through doubt. You step forward along the towpath, boots pressing soft prints into wet ground. The night gathers around you, but you are not lost. You carry every lesson, every fiber match, every dismissed rumor, like an atlas of clues guiding your way. And in that commitment, you rewrite the rules. Letters no longer hold terror, but direction. You will read between them until the final initial leads you to the answer. You breathe out a long sigh, feeling the grip of dread loosen around your ribcage as the city's echoes fade into a distant murmur. The night air is still, and each exhale carries away tension like letters floating on a gentle breeze. Shadows retreat beneath the glow of street lamps that now feel soft rather than ominous, their halos warming the damp pavement. Your heartbeat settles into a steady cadence, a comforting drum guiding you back to calm. In that quiet, you notice the delicate rustle of leaves overhead, the faint drip of water falling from rooftops, and the subtle hum of life persisting beyond. Fear you stand beneath a single lamp, its light a gentle lantern in the vast darkness. With each breath, your shoulders relax, letting go of the strain that has weighed on you since the first disappearance. The images of initials carved into mud and whispered rumors slip away, replaced by the simple awareness of your own presence. Time stretches, and each moment feels drawn out, allowing space for stillness and reflection. Soft thoughts drift through your mind, memories of laughter, the warmth of daylight, the promise of dawn's first rays. You remember what it feels like to be safe, anchored by the rhythms of everyday life, the scent of morning coffee, the hum of conversation, the gentle brush of breeze against your skin. These sensations weave together into a tapestry of reassurance, dissolving the last remnants of terror in the hush that follows. You feel a gentle whisper at the edges of your consciousness. You are more than the fears that sought to ensnare. You are light beyond letters, strength beyond shadows. Breathe deeply, rest now, sweet dreams.